Alright, I'm showing you how to make dust. And I had an example of it, and then Maya crashed because I'm an idiot. So, I'm gonna make a new mix shader. Call this AI Mix, and mix dust. And for the record, I feel like usually, unless you're doing something like having swept dust, or like somewhere where someone's drawn their finger through the dust, this is gonna be the last shader in your mix. So, go into your Hypershade, find your original shaders, and I'm just going to demo this with the blue and the filth for now, because it's going to be a little bit easier to actually see what's happening. So we have that. I'm also sort of reminding myself what I was doing before this cough. Alright, so we have our goofy little blue shader here. He's just hanging out, you know, he's the standard, turn it to 0, and he's brown, turn it to blue, and he's not brown. So there's one more node that I want to show you guys, which actually I was playing with it and I was like, wow, this is indescribably powerful and like pretty cool, and I'll totally use this for stuff in the future, just unrelated things, because it's pretty killer actually. So we go in, you see we have, again, our blue and our filth and all that good stuff. The node we want for the mix is called the aiUtility node. Oh, and I just remembered I have to do a version of this for Redshift. Good, yes. That'll be next. Okay. So, what this does is, again, you can only use either the R, the G, or the B, but if I'm just going to plug one in now to actually see what it's doing. So, I'm just going to look at this, and I'll look at the utility node, and the first thing you want to do is set this to the shade mode to flat. Basically what that's going to do is it's not going to take in any account for lighting or anything like that. There's no specular properties, it's just the color. And the other thing you want to do is set the color mode to normal. And I think perhaps I need to refresh the render view because it's being insane. My biggest pet peeve about the render, there we go. That looks more like what it should look like. Great. Okay. So, let me just really quickly show you again. You want flat for your color and not, like, metal. It's pretty cool looking, honestly, but not useful for what we're doing. Make sure you choose flat. So color mode is normal. This is basically the direction of any given piece of the object according to the world. And it's going to look at, basically, I forgot it doesn't really look super nice with the RGB values. Basically what this does, if it's facing upwards on the Y, and this corresponds to the little like color coding on this little gimbal guy here. So anything pointing upwards is going to be green, anything pointing to the x-axis is going to be red, and anything on the Z is going to be blue. It's honestly like pretty similar to like looking at a normal map. If you've ever, you know, messed with like bump maps, displacement maps, this is like how normal maps work. It's just operating on the entire object and not a specific texture. And it's also not modifying anything about your object, it's just saying basically here is information on your object. This is what the utility node does. It provides information on your object in a visible way. I'm just gonna make sure I'm recording this. I always end up having to record stuff twice, it drives me nuts. Alright, so color mode, just like, I'll come back to normal later, just a side note because it's really cool. You can show like the V coordinates of your object. That one's not particularly cool looking. You can show like the U coordinates. So you can see information about your UVs with this. You can also, if you want to, add in a polygon wireframe, so if you ever need to render a wireframe, this is an alternative way to do it. I'm actually fairly certain this is what they use more or less in the wireframe shader. The shaders gives you more control over like the line color and all of that stuff. If you want to try wireframes, that's a thing. What I actually thought was really, really cool, there's kind of two things. One is, if you need information on the edge length for some reason, reflection lines. I don't know if I'm going to be able to describe this adequately, but if you... the cats are trying to break out again. If you had a actual environment texture in here, and you had a shiny metal object, this is sort of how things would distort, basically. Which is pretty cool. Like, I didn't know that that was information that you can get until like 5 minutes ago. So I don't really know why I personally use that, but it is pretty interesting looking, and I'm sure you could use this to like make some weird texturing choices if you wanted to. Like you could use this as a mix for something if you wanted to. And actually, for grins, if you wanted to, like that's the mix that would make. Ooh, actually that might be really handy for a weird project that I had in mind. That's exciting. I'm playing with that later. Okay. The other thing that I thought was really cool, you can highlight your bad UVs. They will show up bright pink. So this is going to be, and if you look at the UVs on the object, this is pretty much anywhere. I'm going to take the mic with me while I try to smack the cats away from the door. So I apologize if it's a little weird. But basically what that's going to do is shit to the cats. Sorry guys, I'm bad at multitasking and I have no good way to pause the video. So what this does is basically shows you, like here, I've just extruded out and not modified the UVs, so it's going to show you like overlapping UVs, stuff like that. So it'll highlight that pink, and that's actually pretty handy if you're ever like, I wonder if any of my UVs are overlapping. Slap this shader on and you can just tell automatically. So I just thought that was really cool. But anywho, so back to normals, because this is what's actually relevant to things. Is basically what we're going to do is use this red, blue, green info, this directional red, blue, green info to isolate a particular side of the object to color. So in this case, we said that green was facing upwards on the Y. So if we grab the out color green and we put that into our mix, what that theoretically should do, and you can, that is not an obvious color change. Let me switch the colors so that they are, that's pretty looking. Said nobody ever. Alright, there we go. So, swap my colors. I gotta do that like every time. I always put them in the wrong way. But what it's doing is basically anywhere that was showing up green in this aiUtility is showing up dusty effectively here. If we use the red value, it's going to highlight a different side of the object. If we use the blue value, again, it's going to highlight the front of the object effectively. So this is really handy, again, for adding dust to your objects. I'll plug this in a few minutes into the actual mix node, so this shows up with our colors. But it's pretty cool and like weird and handy to be able to do this. So this one is important. Like most times, it's not important if you use the red, blue, or green. This one is very important. It's going to change the entire look of the object. Just again, another thing to note about this, where like this is one of those procedural texturing that will be affected. Same thing as the ambient occlusion node. If you rotate this object, it's going to change the placement of the dust, which, you know, is cool if you're just changing, doing stationary renders. Like that's fine, that makes sense. If you're animating this object, this is not a great node to use, because as your object is spinning through the air, it's always going to have dust on the top of it, which is like a little bit off-putting. So again, just things to be aware of as you are using these textures. And then again, if you wanted to, you could go in and further modify this with some different stuff. Like in this case, like an AI color correct seems like it might be in order. This is like pretty faded and aggressive. So AI color correct, throw in the green because that's really all I care about. What is my mouse doing? What is happening here? The mouse is just like clicking things without my... What? Okay. Great. Cool. Can I click out of this? Here is ShaderBot again. I have control over my mouse here, and for some reason, here I do not. I don't understand what's happening. Well, that's fun. I will probably come back in another video after I restart Maya, but I'll show you just really quickly how to plug in like noise textures, all that stuff, and then we'll go over Redshift. So, farewell again.